Comment where you're watching from today, as we share a story that will restore your faith in humanity. On a chilly autumn evening in Columbus, Ohio, when most people were heading home from work, Usha Vance heard something that would change not just her evening, but the lives of many others. The wife of J.D. Vance was walking through a quiet neighborhood after a community meeting, her thoughts focused on the stack of paperwork waiting at home, when a sound stopped her in her tracks, the unmistakable cry of a child. The streets were nearly empty, with only a few cars passing by and the occasional glow of windows from the row of townhouses lining both sides. The crying seemed to echo between the buildings, making it difficult to pinpoint its source. Most people might have dismissed it as a typical family scene playing out behind closed doors, but something about this cry was different. It carried a weight of desperation that made Usha's heart sink. While others walked past, their collars turned up against the evening chill, earbuds firmly in place, Usha stood still, listening intently. The crying continued, punctuated by quiet whimpers that spoke of exhaustion and fear. Drawing from her experience as a mother and her years of working with families in need, she knew this wasn't an ordinary situation. A group of teenagers walked past, laughing among themselves, drowning out the sound momentarily. Among them was Kevin Davis, who would later become an important witness to what unfolded that evening. The group barely noticed Usha as they passed, their attention focused on their phones and conversation. But as their laughter faded into the distance, the crying became clear once again. Usha began walking slowly, following the sound. The streetlights were just beginning to flicker on, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. She passed several houses, each one eliminating itself as a possible source of the crying. Then she heard it more distinctly, coming from a narrow alley between two buildings. Most people would have hesitated at this point. After all, dark alleys and strange cries don't typically lead to positive outcomes. But Usha's instincts, honed by years of community work and maternal intuition, told her this was a cry for help that couldn't be ignored. She took out her phone, turned on its flashlight, and carefully made her way down the alley. The beam of light revealed nothing at first, just the usual urban detritus of discarded boxes and forgotten trash bins. But then she heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by a quieter sob. Behind one of the larger bins, she found what she was looking for, and the sight made her heart break. A small child, no more than 6 years old, was huddled in the corner, trying to make herself as small as possible. Her name, as Usha would later learn, was Angela Turner, and her story would become a testament to both the failures and triumphs of their community. Angela's clothes were clean but worn, her backpack clutched tightly to her chest like a shield. When the light fell on her face, she squinted but didn't run, perhaps too tired, or perhaps recognizing something in Usha's gentle approach that told her she was safe. "Hi there," Usha said softly, keeping her distance to avoid frightening the child further. "I heard you crying. Are you okay?" The girl didn't answer immediately, but her grip on the backpack loosened slightly. Usha noticed she was shivering, though the evening wasn't particularly cold. It was fear, not temperature, that caused those tremors. Meanwhile, life continued around them, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the alley. Douglas Mitchell, a local shop owner closing up for the day, passed by the alley's entrance, his keys jangling as he locked his door. Patricia Vincent, walking her dog, paused briefly at the sound of voices but continued on her way, assuming it was just neighbors chatting. Usha stayed where she was, making no sudden moves. "My name is Usha," she continued, her voice steady and warm. "I'm here to help. Can you tell me your name?" Angela looked up then, her eyes red from crying but clear and intelligent. "Angela," she whispered, so quietly Usha had to lean in to hear. "That's a beautiful name, Angela. Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The question triggered fresh tears, but also seemed to break a dam of silence. Angela's story came out in fragments, between sobs and hesitations. She had been waiting for her mother, Crystal Johnson, outside the library where they usually met after school. But her mother never came. Hours passed, and as the library prepared to close, Angela had panicked. Rather than talk to the librarians, she had run, scared, confused, and eventually lost in unfamiliar streets. What Angela didn't know, And what Usha would soon discover was that Crystal Johnson had been involved in a minor car accident on her way to pick up her daughter. She was fine, but her phone had been damaged in the crash, leaving her unable to contact anyone. She was at that very moment frantically searching the library and surrounding areas, sick with worry about her daughter. As Angela talked, Usha noticed Kevin Davis and his friends had returned, hovering at the entrance to the alley. Their earlier laughter was gone, replaced by concerned expressions. Kevin, showing maturity beyond his years, stepped forward. "Mrs. Vance?" he called out softly. "Do you need help?" Usha turned, recognizing him from community events. "Yes, Kevin. Could you please call the police? We need to help find this young lady's mother." Kevin was already pulling out his phone, but Angela's reaction was immediate and terrified. "No. Please, no police. My mom will be so mad." Usha understood the fear. In some communities, involving the police could complicate matters rather than help. She made a quick decision. "Kevin, wait. Instead, could you and your friends help spread the word? We need to find Crystal Johnson. She drives a blue Honda and works at Memorial Hospital." The teenagers nodded, immediately understanding their mission. They split up, some heading toward the library, others toward the hospital, all sharing the information on their social media accounts. What happened next would demonstrate the power of community in the digital age. Within minutes, the story of the missing mother and daughter began spreading through local Facebook groups and community forums. Michelle Hammond, a nurse at Memorial Hospital, recognized Crystal's name and remembered her coming through the ER earlier after a fender bender. She immediately reached out through the hospital's channels to locate her. Meanwhile, Usha had managed to coax Angela out of her hiding place. They sat together on a nearby bench, under the warm glow of a streetlight. Usha had wrapped her own scarf around the girl's shoulders, and someone, likely Patricia Vincent, who had returned after seeing the gathering crowd, had brought them both hot chocolate from the coffee shop around the corner. The community's response continued to grow. Robert Manning, a local bus driver, called in to report he'd seen a woman matching Crystal's description searching frantically near the library. Stephanie Norman, a librarian working late, joined the impromptu search party that had formed. Even Douglas Mitchell reopened his shop to provide a warm place for people to coordinate their efforts. Jennifer Craig, a social worker who had worked with both JD and Usha Vance on community initiatives, arrived on the scene, having seen the social media posts. She helped keep Angela calm while Usha coordinated with the growing number of volunteers. The next 45 minutes demonstrated the best of human nature. Strangers came together, sharing information, offering help, and showing what a community could achieve when united by compassion. Kevin Davis and his friends, initially just passing by, became key organizers, using their social media savvy to keep everyone connected and informed. Then, just as the search was about to expand to neighboring areas, a cry of relief cut through the evening air. Crystal Johnson, directed by the network of volunteers, had finally found her way to the bench where her daughter waited. The reunion brought tears to everyone's eyes, mother and daughter clinging to each other, both apologizing through their sobs, while the gathered crowd tried to pretend they weren't wiping away tears of their own. Crystal's story came out in rushed explanations. The accident, though minor, had left her without a phone. She'd been searching frantically, growing more desperate by the minute. She'd gone to the police station, but in her panic had given them incomplete information. The community's informal network had proved far more effective at reuniting mother and daughter. As the crowd began to disperse, their good deed done for the day, Usha noticed something remarkable. People who had been strangers hours before were exchanging phone numbers, making plans to meet again, discussing ways to prevent similar situations in the future. Jennifer Craig was already talking about setting up a community support network for single parents. Douglas Mitchell offered to make his shop a safe haven for any lost children. Kevin Davis and his friends were inspired to create a local social media network specifically for community emergencies. The evening could have ended there, with a happy reunion and strengthened community bonds. But Usha Vance saw an opportunity for something more. She recognized in this incident a larger issue that needed addressing: the vulnerability of working parents, the gaps in community safety nets, the power of connected communities to solve problems that institutions sometimes couldn't. In the days that followed, the story of Angela and Crystal became a catalyst for change in their community. JD and Usha Vance worked with local leaders to establish better support systems for working parents. Crystal Johnson, once she recovered from the shock of that evening, became an advocate for community safety initiatives. The teenagers who helped spread the word started a volunteer program at their school, teaching seniors how to use social media for community support. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the community saw itself. People who had lived as strangers despite being neighbors began to look out for each other more. The informal network that had come together that evening became a model for other communities, showing how technology and human compassion could work together to create stronger, safer neighborhoods. Angela Turner, the little girl whose cry for help had started it all, began to smile more at school. Her mother, no longer feeling alone in her struggles, found support and friendship in the community that had helped reunite them. The incident had shown her that she wasn't alone, that help was available if she needed it. The story of that evening spread beyond their community, inspiring others to look at their own neighborhoods differently. It showed that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest actions, like stopping to listen when you hear a child crying. For Usha Vance, the incident reinforced what she had always believed, that communities are only as strong as their willingness to help their most vulnerable members. Her simple act of stopping to help had created ripples that continued to spread, touching lives far beyond that dark alley where she had found a frightened child. As we share this story, we're reminded that heroes don't always wear capes or badges. Sometimes they're just people who choose to stop and listen, to help when they could have walked away, to bring others together when it would have been easier to stay apart. What would you have done if you heard a child crying? Let us know in the comments below. The story of Usha Vance and Angela Turner could have ended that night, but what happened next would transform an entire community. As the morning sun rose over Columbus the next day, the events of the previous evening had already begun spreading through social media and local news channels, catching the attention of Stephanie Morgan, a veteran social worker who had seen too many similar cases slip through the cracks. The incident highlighted a growing crisis in their community, one that Stephanie had been trying to bring to light for years. Working parents, especially single mothers like Crystal Johnson, were struggling with a system that offered little support and even less understanding. The accident that had separated Crystal from her daughter could have happened to anyone, but not everyone would have been fortunate enough to have a community rally around them. Lawrence David, the principal of Angela's school, noticed something different that morning. Students were talking about what had happened, but not with the usual playground gossip tone. Instead, there was a sense of pride in how their community had come together. Kevin Davis and his friends, who had helped spread the word the previous night, were being treated like local heroes by their classmates. But it was during the morning assembly that something remarkable happened. Principal David had planned to address the events of the previous night, to remind students about safety protocols. Before he could begin, however, Rebecca Watson, one of the quieter students, raised her hand and shared her own story. She too had once been lost, too scared to ask for help, thinking she would get in trouble. Her story resonated with other students, and suddenly the assembly became something else entirely, a forum for sharing experiences and suggesting solutions. The teenagers, led by Kevin Davis and his friend Michelle Mendoza, proposed creating a student safety network. Their idea was simple but powerful, using their technological savvy to create a community support system. Principal David, seeing the enthusiasm and potential, immediately offered his support. Meanwhile, across town, Usha Vance was meeting with Jennifer Craig and a group of community leaders at Douglas Mitchell's shop, which had become an unofficial headquarters for their growing movement. Crystal Johnson was there too, still shaken from the previous night's events but determined to turn her experience into something positive. The meeting began with what they thought would be a simple discussion about community safety, but it quickly evolved into something much more comprehensive. Ronald Walker, a retired police officer, shared insights about why traditional systems sometimes failed to help in situations like Crystal's. It's not about lack of resources, he explained, it's about disconnection. We've lost the neighborhood watch mentality that once kept communities safe. Elizabeth Meyer, a local business owner, spoke about how technology could bridge that gap. She had watched the previous night's events unfold on social media and saw the potential for creating a more organized system. "What happened last night was beautiful but chaotic," she said. "Imagine if we had a proper network in place, ready to activate when needed." As the meeting progressed, more community members arrived, each bringing their own perspectives and ideas. Patricia Vincent, who had brought hot chocolate to Angela the night before, suggested creating safe spaces throughout the neighborhood, designated locations where children could go if they needed help. Douglas Mitchell immediately volunteered his shop as the first such location. The energy in the room was electric, but it was Usha Vance who helped channel it into actionable plans. Drawing from her experience in community organization, she helped the group identify key areas where they could make immediate impact, creating a network of safe spaces, developing a community alert system, and establishing support systems for working parents. By midday, what had started as a response to one incident had evolved into a comprehensive community safety initiative. Michelle Hammond, the nurse who had helped locate Crystal the previous night, brought in colleagues from Memorial Hospital to discuss creating a proper protocol for similar emergencies. They understood that not every lost child or parent in crisis would be lucky enough to have a community spontaneously mobilize on their behalf. The afternoon brought unexpected support from local businesses. Gregory Ward, owner of several restaurants in the area, offered to provide free meals to children waiting at designated safe spaces. Stephanie Norman, the librarian, proposed extending library hours and creating a supervised waiting area for children whose parents worked late. But perhaps the most touching moment came when Angela Turner herself arrived after school, accompanied by her mother. The little girl whose cry had started it all now stood before the group, shy but determined. With encouragement from her mother, she shared her own ideas about what would have helped her that night, simple things, seen through a child's eyes, that the adults might have overlooked. "Maybe if there was a special phone number, just for kids," she suggested quietly. "Not like 9/11, but something that doesn't feel so scary." Her words sparked a discussion about creating a child-friendly emergency contact system, one that would help children feel safe asking for help. As the day progressed, the initiative continued to grow. James Collins, a local tech entrepreneur, offered to develop a mobile app that would connect all the safe spaces and volunteers. Kimberly Evans, a counselor at Angela's school, proposed implementing a buddy system for children walking home from school. The media began to take notice. Laura Pierce, a local reporter, arrived to cover what she thought would be a simple human interest story. Instead, she found herself documenting the birth of a movement. Her report would later catch the attention of neighboring communities, who would reach out to learn more about implementing similar programs. By evening, the group had established clear goals and action plans. The Safe Space Network would be their first priority, with Douglas Mitchell's shop serving as a pilot location. Jennifer Craig would coordinate with social services to ensure proper protocols were in place. Kevin Davis and his friends would help develop the social media component, ensuring that both parents and children could easily access help when needed. Crystal Johnson, who had remained quiet for much of the day, finally spoke up as the meeting was wrapping up. Her words captured the essence of what they were trying to achieve. "Last night, I was just a scared mother looking for her child. Today, I'm part of something bigger. We're not just creating a safety net, we're rebuilding the village that it takes to raise a child." The impact of their initiative began to show almost immediately. Within days, dozens of businesses had signed up to become designated safe spaces. The Student Safety Network at Lawrence David School became a model for other schools in the district. Community members who had never spoken to their neighbors before found themselves connected through their shared commitment to keeping their children safe. But the most significant change was less tangible. People began to look out for each other in ways they hadn't before. When Michael Hudson got a flat tire while driving his kids home from school, 3 different people stopped to help. When Brittany Roberts' babysitter canceled at the last minute, the new parent support network quickly found a solution. The story reached J.D. Vance, who was working in Washington at the time. He was moved not just by his wife's initial act of kindness, but by how the community had transformed it into lasting change. In a statement to the press, he emphasized the importance of grassroots community action in addressing social issues. 1 month after the incident that started it all, the community gathered again at Douglas Mitchell's shop. This time, it was to celebrate the official launch of their community safety network. Angela Turner, no longer the scared child from the alley, cut the ribbon alongside Usha Vance. The shop's window now displayed a bright blue sign marking it as a safe space, one of many that had sprouted throughout the neighborhood. The celebration was more than just a ceremony. It was a testament to how one small act of kindness could spark a revolution of caring. Parents who had once felt isolated now found themselves part of a supportive community. Children who might have been afraid to ask for help now knew exactly where to turn. The teenagers who had helped spread the word that first night had discovered their power to create positive change. As the sun set on the celebration, Usha Vance stood with Crystal and Angela Johnson, watching the community they had helped build. The fear and desperation of that night in the alley seemed distant now, replaced by a sense of hope and connection. What had started with a child's cry had become a symphony of community action, proving that sometimes the darkest moments can lead to the brightest changes. The story of that transformation continues to inspire others, showing that when we choose to stop and listen, to reach out instead of walking by, we create ripples that can transform entire communities. It reminds us that the solution to many of our social problems lies not in grand government initiatives or elaborate programs, but in the simple act of neighbors helping neighbors. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How has your community come together in times of need? What small acts of kindness have you witnessed that made a big difference? 3 months after the night that changed everything, the impact of Usha Vance's simple act of kindness had spread far beyond their Columbus neighborhood. The Community Safety Network had caught the attention of Rachel Hernandez, a state legislator who saw in it a model for addressing similar issues across Ohio. The morning began with Usha joining Rachel at the state capitol, where they would present the program's success to a committee of interested parties. Among them was William Patterson, a skeptical bureaucrat who had seen many community initiatives fade away once their initial enthusiasm waned. But what he heard that day would change his perspective entirely. Crystal Johnson, now a confident spokesperson for the program, shared statistics that were hard to ignore. In just 3 months, their neighborhood had seen a 40% decrease in reports of lost or stranded children. The Safe Space Network, which had started with Douglas Mitchell's shop, had expanded to include over 200 locations across the city. But it was the personal stories that truly captured the committee's attention. Angela Turner, whose cry for help had started it all, had written a letter that Usha read aloud. The young girl described how different her neighborhood felt now, how she no longer feared walking home from school, knowing there were safe spaces and friendly faces everywhere she looked. Kevin Davis and Michelle Mendoza, the teenagers who had helped spread the word that first night, presented the digital platform they had developed. What had started as a simple social media alert system had evolved into a sophisticated community network, connecting parents, schools, and safe spaces in real time. Their presentation impressed even the most tech-savvy committee members. During the lunch break, Stephanie Morgan, the veteran social worker, shared her observations with the committee. In 20 years of social work, she explained, I've never seen a program that so effectively bridges the gap between institutional support and community action. This isn't just about lost children anymore. It's about rebuilding the social fabric that keeps communities strong. The afternoon session brought unexpected support from Ronald Cooper, a business leader who had initially dismissed the program as impractical. His company had been one of the first to designate their locations as safe spaces, and he reported that employee morale had improved significantly. When people feel they're part of something bigger than themselves, he noted, it transforms how they approach their work and their community. Jennifer Craig presented data showing how the program had reduced the burden on emergency services. Rather than calling 911 for every minor incident, community members now had a network of resources to draw upon. This had allowed police and emergency responders to focus on more serious situations while ensuring that families in need still received proper support. Lawrence David, the school principal, shared how the program had transformed his school's culture. Students were more engaged, attendance had improved, and disciplinary issues had decreased. When children feel safe and supported, he explained, they're free to focus on learning and growing. The committee was particularly impressed by how the program had adapted to serve different community needs. Patricia Vincent described how the Safe Space Network had helped elderly residents during a recent heat wave, proving that the system could respond to various types of emergencies. As the presentation continued, Douglas Mitchell shared how his shop had become more than just a safe space. It was now a community hub where people gathered to share ideas and support each other. Other business owners in the network reported similar experiences, noting how the program had strengthened local economic ties while serving a social purpose. The afternoon session was interrupted by breaking news that perfectly illustrated the program's impact. Michael Hudson's daughter had become disoriented after getting off at the wrong bus stop. Instead of panicking, she had remembered her safe space training and gone to the nearest designated location, a bookstore owned by Elizabeth Meyer. Within minutes, the community network had activated, and Michael was reunited with his daughter before she could become truly frightened. This real-time demonstration of the system's effectiveness silenced even the most persistent skeptics. William Patterson, who had started the day doubtful, was now taking detailed notes and asking questions about implementation costs and scalability. The presentation concluded with a surprise video compilation of community members sharing their experiences. Brittany Roberts described how the Parent Support Network had helped her keep her job during a family crisis. Gregory Ward explained how his restaurants had become more than just safe spaces. They were now part of a community web that looked out for each other. James Collins, the tech entrepreneur who had developed the community app, presented usage statistics that showed steady growth in engagement. Unlike many social initiatives that peaked early and faded, their program was showing increasing participation as more people recognized its value. The committee's response was unprecedented. Rachel Hernandez announced immediate plans to draft legislation that would provide funding and support for similar programs across the state. William Patterson volunteered to head a task force that would study how to implement the model in other communities. But perhaps the most touching moment came when Angela Turner made a surprise appearance. Now confident and poised, she stood before the committee and shared how the program had changed her life. "That night in the alley, I thought I was alone," she said. "Now I know I'll never be alone again, because my whole community is looking out for me." The impact of her words was visible on every face in the room. This wasn't just about statistics and programs, it was about transforming fear into security, isolation into connection, and helplessness into empowerment. As the day drew to a close, Crystal Johnson and Usha Vance stood together, watching as committee members continued to discuss implementation plans long after the formal presentation had ended. What had started with a child's cry in an alley had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. The evening news covered the committee meeting but focused on an unexpected aspect: how the program had begun healing political and social divides in the community. People who might never have interacted were now working together toward a common goal. The Safe Space Network had become a bridge, connecting different parts of the community in ways that transcended traditional boundaries. Laura Pierce, the local reporter who had covered the story from the beginning, noted how the program had evolved beyond its original scope. What started as a safety network for children had become a model for community resilience and mutual support. Her report highlighted how other cities were already reaching out, eager to learn from their experience. The next morning, J.D. Vance called from Washington to congratulate the team. He emphasized how this grassroots initiative exemplified the best of American community spirit, neighbors helping neighbors, turning challenges into opportunities for positive change. As news of the committee's positive response spread through the community, celebrations broke out at various safe space locations. Douglas Mitchell's shop was packed with people sharing their hopes for the program's future. Kevin Davis and his friends were already working on updates to the alert system, incorporating suggestions from users across the city. The success at the state capitol marked a new chapter in their journey, but for Usha Vance, the most meaningful moment came later that evening. Walking home, she passed the alley where she had found Angela 3 months ago. Where there had once been shadows and fear, there was now a brightly painted mural showing connected hands forming a safety net. The mural had been created by local artists working with children from the neighborhood, including Angela Turner. It served as a powerful reminder of how one person stopping to help another could spark a movement that transformed an entire community. Stephanie Morgan, watching the evening news coverage, summed it up perfectly. What we're seeing here isn't just a program or a policy, it's a revolution in how communities care for their own. It proves that when we choose to stop and listen, to reach out instead of walk away, we create the possibility for real, lasting change. The story of that transformation continues to inspire others, showing that sometimes the smallest actions can lead to the biggest changes. It reminds us that in a world that often seems divided and fearful, the power to create positive change lies within each of us. Let us know in the comments. What positive changes would you like to see in your community? How could you help make them happen? 1 year after that fateful night in the alley, Columbus was hosting a national conference on community safety initiatives. The keynote speaker was none other than Usha Vance, but this time, she wasn't alone on stage. Beside her stood Angela Turner, Crystal Johnson, and representatives from 30 different cities that had implemented their own versions of the Community Safety Network. The grand ballroom of the Columbus Convention Center was filled to capacity. Among the attendees was Catherine Patterson, a community organizer from Seattle who had traveled across the country to learn from their success. She sat next to William Patterson, the once skeptical bureaucrat who had become one of the program's strongest advocates. The morning began with a powerful video montage, showing how the initiative had spread across the country. In Detroit, Robert Fletcher had adapted the Safe Space Network to help homeless youth find shelter and support. In Phoenix, Michelle Hammond's sister, Rebecca Hammond, had implemented the program in hospital emergency rooms, creating a new protocol for helping displaced families. But it was the local success stories that truly captured the audience's attention. Douglas Mitchell, whose shop had become the first safe space, now operated a network of community centers across Columbus. Kevin Davis and Michelle Mendoza, the teenagers who had helped spread the word that first night, had received full scholarships to study community development at Ohio State University. Jennifer Craig presented the annual impact report, and the numbers were staggering. Over 10,000 safe spaces had been established nationwide. The community alert system they had developed had helped reunite more than 5,000 families in crisis. Emergency response times had improved by 30% thanks to better community coordination. Lawrence David, the school principal, shared how the program had transformed education in their district. Attendance rates had reached record highs, and student anxiety levels had decreased significantly. When children feel safe in their community, he explained, they're free to focus on learning and growing. The afternoon sessions featured breakout groups led by various community members. Patricia Vincent ran a workshop on creating age-friendly safe spaces that served both children and seniors. Gregory Ward shared how local businesses could integrate community safety into their operations while strengthening their customer base. In one particularly moving session, Crystal Johnson and Angela Turner led a discussion about family resilience. Angela, now 7 years old and considerably more confident, shared her perspective on how the program had changed her life. I used to be scared to walk home from school, she said. Now I know that everywhere I look, there's someone who will help me if I need it. The conference took an unexpected turn when Rachel Hernandez announced that the state of Ohio was increasing funding for the program. William Patterson followed with news that federal agencies were studying the model for nationwide implementation. What had started with one person stopping to help a crying child had grown into a movement that was reshaping how communities approached public safety. During the lunch break, Stephanie Morgan hosted a panel discussion with social workers from across the country. They shared how the program had transformed their work, making it easier to connect families with resources and support. We're no longer just responding to crises, she explained. We're building networks that prevent crises from happening in the first place. The afternoon brought a surprise appearance by J.D. Vance, who had flown in from Washington to support the initiative. He spoke about how the program exemplified the best of American community spirit, turning challenges into opportunities for positive change. His presence added national significance to what had started as a local grassroots movement. But perhaps the most powerful moment came when Michael Hudson shared how the program had saved his daughter just months earlier. His story resonated with parents across the audience, reminding everyone that behind the statistics and success stories were real families whose lives had been touched by the initiative. Elizabeth Meyer's bookstore, which had helped Michael's daughter, was now one of many businesses that had expanded their community role. She described how becoming a safe space had transformed her store into a neighborhood hub where people gathered not just to buy books, but to connect and support each other. The conference also highlighted unexpected benefits of the program. Ronald Cooper presented data showing how businesses that participated in the Safe Space Network had seen increased customer loyalty and employee satisfaction. James Collins demonstrated how the community alert system had evolved to help during natural disasters and other emergencies. As the day progressed, success stories continued to pour in. Brittany Roberts described how the Parent Support Network had expanded to include job training and childcare resources. Laura Pierce shared how media coverage of the initiative had inspired similar programs in countries around the world. The evening session focused on future developments. Kevin Davis and his team unveiled the next generation of the Community Alert System, which included features for helping elderly residents and people with disabilities. Jennifer Craig announced plans for a national training program that would help other cities implement the model effectively. Angela Turner's mother, Crystal, took the stage to share how the experience had changed their lives. She had gone back to school and was now working on a degree in social work, inspired by the support she had received from her community. Her story exemplified how the program wasn't just helping people in crisis, it was empowering them to help others. The conference concluded with a ceremony honoring the various people who had made the program possible. Douglas Mitchell received recognition for providing the first safe space. The teenagers who had helped spread the word that first night were celebrated for their continued involvement in community development. But the most touching moment came when Angela Turner presented Usha Vance with a hand-drawn picture. It showed the dark alley where they had first met, transformed into a garden full of helping hands and friendly faces. The artwork perfectly captured how one act of kindness had grown into a movement that had transformed countless lives. As the conference wound down, participants shared their plans for implementing similar programs in their own communities. Catherine Patterson from Seattle had already scheduled meetings with local business owners. William Patterson was coordinating with federal agencies to develop national guidelines. The evening ended with a community dinner at Douglas Mitchell's original shop, now expanded into a community center. The walls were covered with photos and stories from the past year, each one representing a life touched by the program. Among them was the original mural from the alley, preserved as a reminder of where it all began. Looking around the room, Usha Vance saw how their community had been transformed. Where there had once been strangers passing each other on the street, there were now connected neighbors working together to create something beautiful. The fear and isolation that had left a child crying in an alley had been replaced by a network of support and caring that continued to grow stronger every day. The story of that transformation continues to inspire others, showing how one person's choice to stop and help can spark changes that ripple out in unexpected ways. It reminds us that in a world that often seems divided and fearful, the power to create positive change lies within each of us. As we conclude this story, we invite you to reflect on your own community. What small act of kindness could you perform today that might grow into something bigger? How could you help create the kind of neighborhood where no child feels alone or afraid? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the power of human kindness. Remember, sometimes the smallest actions can lead to the biggest changes. Has your community ever come together in a way that surprised and inspired you? Let us know in the comments below. Your story could be the spark that inspires others to make a difference in their own neighborhoods.